thank you for mentioning Gao. Gao Zhisheng, ladies and gentlemen, has been in prison now for 7 years. His wife and 2 children were obliged to flee through Thailand, and they're now refugees in the San Francisco area in California. And he's been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize twice, and I hope that maybe next year he'll get it. But time is very short, so I'll get right to it. Permit me to thank you for the welcome given to the recent delegation from Canada. The visit and our Prime Minister's address to the Knesset, I don't think it was in this room, were widely reported across our country, and I believe Mr. Harper's talk here was one of the best he has ever given. Permit me to repeat just a couple of samples from it. Quote, Canada supports Israel fundamentally because it is right to do so. The special friendship between Canada and Israel is rooted in shared values. Israel is the only country in the Middle East which has long anchored itself in the ideals of freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. When universal values are threatened anywhere, they are threatened everywhere, close quote. Those are all, as I hope you know, bits from the Prime Minister's speech here. When human dignity is denied in China, it threatens us all. So I hope both your legislators and the peoples of Israel and Canada will do what is correct without fear. All of us in the international coalition to end organ pillaging, trafficking in China, can be pleased that you're holding this event. And I can't tell you how pleased I am about people that you've attracted here, such as Dr. Lavie and Ethan Gutman and Slew. Time is urgent. I am certain, as you saw in the film and you've heard a moment ago, that men and women convicted of nothing are currently being killed in China so that their vital organs can be sold like pieces of meat. The principal victim community, Falun Gong, uses a set of gentle exercises for the body. For the mind, its core principles are, quote, truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance, which of course echo those of many other faiths. Falun Gong was introduced to the general public in China only in 1992. It grew within 7 years, ladies and gentlemen, to 70 to 100 million practitioners by the government's own estimate. Its belief system differs from the atheism and materialism of the Communist Party. In July of '99, then party leader Jiang Zemin launched a violent campaign, the stated purpose of which was to eradicate Falun Gong. A U.S. government report concluded that at least half of the inmates in the vast network of forced labor camps across China, one estimate says that there are 350 of these camps, other estimates are much larger. I think Ethan Gutman will talk about that. Former detainees such as Sarah, interviewed by David Matus and myself, consistently indicated that Falun Gong were the largest group in the camps and were singled out for inhuman torture and abuse. I must say, Sarah, I've never heard of a worse case than your own, the details I've heard. Tens of millions of peaceful, non-political Falun Gong from all regions and walks of life have been deemed subhuman by the Beijing government. The party's state policy is that they can accordingly be killed on demand without any recourse whatsoever. In May of 2006, as you've heard now on the screen, the coalition to investigate the persecution of Falun Gong asked David Matus and myself to investigate the claims of organ pillaging, trafficking from living Falun Gong practitioners. We put out 2 reports, 1 book, and have continued to investigate the matter. You can get our report in 18 languages, including, I'm happy to say, Hebrew, on the internet quite easily. We concluded, as David Matus said a few moments ago, that 41,500 transplants done in the years 2000-2005 alone in China, the only plausible explanation for them was Falun Gong. Permit me to mention just a tiny bit of the really 52 kinds of evidence we found. I was a prosecutor for 10 years. I should know something about proof and evidence. David Matus has practiced law for 35 years in Canada. 1. Investigators made many calls to hospitals, detention centers, and other facilities across the country, claiming to be relatives of patients needing transplants, and asking if the hospitals had organs of Falun Gong for sale. We obtained on tape and then transcribed and translated admissions that a number of facilities tracking in Falun Gong were available. Falun Gong prisoners who later got out of China testified that they were systematically blood tested and organ examined while in camps across the country, and you've heard that several times already. This could not have been for their health because they were systematically tortured. But it was necessary, as I'm sure you all know, necessary for organ transplants and for building a bank of live donors. We interviewed the ex-wife of a surgeon from Sujiatan in Shenyang City, Liaoning. He told her that he had removed corneas from 2,000 Falun Gong prisoners between 2001 and 2003. He made it clear to her that none of these sources survived because other surgeons removed their organs and their bodies were then burned. I was going to go through what's been done in other places around the world. I know time is extremely short, so I'll just mention them, and I think there's some text if you wanted to what I say. The European Parliament, as discussed, they've been very, very helpful. The United States, I think you've seen references already, has been helpful. Now Israel is in fact the leader, thanks to the Knesset and Dr. Lavie and others. You have, well, I don't need to tell you what you've done. I'm sure you all know what the Knesset has done. Ireland, Australia. By the way, Australia is interesting because the New South Wales Parliament in Australia is proposing to ban the use of any trafficked organ from anywhere. Don't even have to name China, but China is the only country which actually sells trafficked organs. The United Kingdom is moving, I think, on this issue finally. There are a lot of NGOs that are helping. I have to single out for praise, he's going to get tired of me mentioning his name, Dr. Lavie, Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting, DAFO, who have been effective in a number of nations. Perhaps your parliament, your Knesset, would consider helping to form a Parliamentarians Against Forced Organ Harvesting. It would be I think it would be a marvelous thing if we could get the parliamentarians doing this the way the doctors have done it. David Matus and I engaged in extensive interviews of organ recipients and their family members. The surgery is conducted in almost total secrecy. Recipients and their support networks are not told the identity of the donors. One organ recipient told us that a military doctor, I think he was Major Tan, T-A-N, in Shanghai, tested the compatibility of 7 sets of kidneys before a successful match was made. 8 people died, ladies and gentlemen, of course, before he got his kidney. And I talked to him, he's doing fine now. The doctor would leave the hospital in his army uniform and return later with a container containing 2 kidneys. The International Coalition to End Organ Pillaging in China will not rest until this inhuman commerce ends in the People's Republic of China, until the growing loss of face, often achieved through naming and shaming. Please don't underestimate the value of naming and shaming with respect to Beijing. Proves effective. Other countries have an ethical responsibility to end complicity by their own nationals. Israel and other nations could enact measures to combat international organ transplant abuses through extraterritorial legislation, criminalizing the purchase of trafficked organs anywhere. I don't believe that is yet the case in Israel, but please tell me if I'm mistaken. And is the case? It's a criminal offense? Okay, good. You could bar entry of those involved in trafficking organs, and recognize that standing for human dignity will not cost you any commerce or trade with China. 3 examples I can give you are Norway. You can imagine the flack they got after they gave the Nobel Prize to Liu Xiaobo, but I don't believe Norway's trade has suffered one bit with China. The Czech Republic, you probably recall the late Václav Havel was told if the Dalai Lama came to Prague, there would be basically no more trade between Czechoslovakia at the time and China. I'm told it didn't affect their trade one bit. Our Prime Minister Harper in 2009 said that Canada would not sacrifice its principles to the almighty buck. And shortly after he said that, and Bombardier, one of our big companies, announced its biggest deal everywhere in China. The Chinese will trade with Israel or Canada because they want your brilliance, they want your scientific expertise, and if you stand up on principle, I think they respect people that stand up on principle and have a bit of backbone. Anyway, I'm just finishing here. Responsible business people should reduce trade and investment, in my opinion, until this government ceases organ trafficking. Beijing has also directed all of its embassies to spread hatred and false information against Falun Gong. Go on the Chinese embassy website here in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, and I'm sure you'll find all kinds of outrageous things about Falun Gong. In such circumstances, how can people of conscience continue to do business as usual? In so doing, you're financing and nurturing a party state which pillages organs from its citizens for commercial purposes. And finally, sorry I've gone on so long, many of us in and beyond China ought to be having a greater impact in this grave matter, not only because it's necessary to protect thousands of innocent people from being killed, but also because it's good for China, the international community as a whole. We all want a China that enjoys the rule of law, dignity for all, and democratic governance. Thank you. Toda Rabba.